Hello, everybody, and welcome. It is Alley Talk. It is Friday. It is 2 p.m., and it's time to talk Phillies. And boy, howdy, do we have a lot to talk about the Phillies because today has just been kind of miserable if you're a Phillies fan. Well, first off, I'm Alec Kostival of Philly Sports Network. Kyle Fisher was not able to join us this week, our usual host, but you've seen me here before on Alley Talk. But let's just get into it. The Phillies got blindsided today. Absolutely blindsided. It was probably right around noon when it was announced that the Mets were signing Bo Bichette to a 3-year, $126 million deal. $42 million a year to play Bo Bichette at third base, a position he had never played before. Now, apparently, to Bob Nightingale, usually fairly trusted, sometimes makes mistakes of his own, but apparently the Phillies did acquiesce to Bo Bichette's demands and had a 7-year, $200 million offer on the table. And they were ready to sign him. But last night, of course, the Los Angeles Dodgers signed Kyle Tucker to the most expensive per year deal in Major League Baseball history at $60 million a year. 4 years, $240 million. The Mets were also rumored in on him at $55 million a year, $220 million over 4 years. But then the Dodgers got him, and the Mets apparently pivoted to Bo Bichette. And once they pivoted to Bo Bichette, it was heading up a creek without a paddle for the Phillies. The Phillies got blindsided. This is what it felt like, I'm sure, for Yankees fans in 2011, right before Christmas, when Cliff Lee chose the Phillies over the Yankees, even though the Yankees offered more money. I am assuming that's how that felt, because now we are dealing with it in real time, that the Phillies, for one of the first times since they've been considered one of the top market teams in the league in terms of spending, have not been able to get the player they were targeting. It really hasn't happened much. If anything, maybe you could point to like Jason Worth when he signed with the Washington Nationals, and the Washington Nationals gave him a ton of money. But it really hasn't happened before. Remember, we're in a new era of the Phillies when the Phillies actually spend money. It was just a couple years ago when we were talking about, will the Phillies ever go over the luxury tax threshold, which now they have for the last few seasons. But that was something they were unwilling to do for a long time. It really wasn't until they signed Bryce Harper that they were ever in the top of the market for these massive young free agents. Of course, that offseason, it was whether it's going to be Manny Machado or Bryce Harper, and Bryce Harper ended up being the player that fell to Philadelphia. And wow, is that 13-year, 330 deal looking like a steal for the Phillies when you see Kyle Tucker make $240 million in just 4 years? Could you imagine? And of course, the Phillies don't do opt-outs either. And both Kyle Tucker and Bo Bichette have opt-outs in these massive short-term deals. Kyle Tucker has opt-outs after the second and third year. Bo Bichette has opt-outs after the first and second year. So they could be free agents again. Kyle Tucker in 2 years. Bo Bichette could be a free agent next season. But of course, the Phillies, their policy is to not offer these opt-outs. Could you imagine what Bryce Harper's contract could have looked like, and probably not with the Phillies, if he had an opt-out after his third season? That would have been his MVP year of 2021, entering the free agent market at, I think he would have been around 30. No, he wouldn't even been 30 yet. I think he was 29 at that time. What massive contract would have he gotten? Trey Turner, after the season he had last year, his third season in Philly, winning a batting title. Could you imagine if he opted out? And he's making just over $27 million a year. The Phillies have been able to negotiate these contracts and actually have favorable deals to what the market value has suddenly become, with teams like the Mets and the Dodgers having tons of money and spending it obviously willingly. The only player the Phillies have actually paid at max value is Zach Wheeler, making over $40 million a year for the last 4 years of his career till he ultimately retires. And that's what we know from what he said. But it is kind of funny to me. You look at the Mets, and they chose to go down the Bichette route after the pivot from Tucker. Now, it makes sense that you should pivot to someone after missing out on Kyle Tucker. And Cody Bellinger is flirting with the Yankees, so he's probably not an option to pivot to. But if you look at the Mets, their roster is really weird. I honestly think, in my opinion, the Phillies still have a better roster than the Mets. If you have time in your moment right now, I want you to look up the Mets depth chart. I want you to think about, what outfielders do the Mets have? Of course, they have Juan Soto, one of the best hitters of our generation. You know, he's been compared to Ted Williams. Everybody loves the Soto shuffle. Who else do you think they have as an outfielder? The fun part is they don't. They have Tyrone Taylor listed as both their primary left fielder and primary center fielder. The Mets already have a $336 million payroll. Their payroll last year was, I think, about $342 million. Are they really going to overpay for Harrison Bader for center field? How are they going to address this? Are they going to trade Brett Beatty and one of their pitching prospects to find an outfielder somewhere? I'm assuming the Mets aren't done. But right now, with Bichette on the roster, going to play third base, which he has never played before in his professional career, they don't seem like a really cohesive unit. The Mets are paying two players $62 million for 2026 to play positions they've never played before in their career. Bo Bichette at third base and Jorge Polanco at first base. They are trying to do some odd calculus that a 10-year-old would do when trying to put a team together in MLB The Show. The Phillies still have a cohesive unit. Do they still have to address the Nick Castellanos issue? Yes. But they also figured out and solidified the catching position today, finally reuniting with catcher JT Realmuto. Now, this was just reported maybe about 45 minutes ago. JT Realmuto is re-signing with the Philadelphia Phillies, 3 years, $45 million. Apparently, there are incentives that could make it up to $60 million over 3 years, which certainly does feel like an overpay to JT Realmuto. Now, what we have heard about JT Realmuto for about the past month has been the Phillies have an offer on the table. We've heard from Jim Salisbury that apparently the Phillies have a 3-year offer on the table. And it certainly feels like they had a 3-year, $45 million deal on the table, but it seemed like JT really wanted $20 million. And these incentives, whatever they are, they haven't been announced just yet. Those will presumably make up the difference. Who knows whether it's, if he makes an all-star team, if it's a certain amount of games caught, a certain amount of home runs, something like that, the MVP consideration, all sorts of things like that. I mean, JT Realmuto obviously has been an important part to the Philadelphia Phillies. Multiple pitchers on the staff have credited him with the work they have done, especially, your Zach Wheeler's, your Chris Sanchez's, your Jesus Luzardo's, all of them have been glowing when talking about JT Realmuto. So in that regard, it's nice to have JT back in the fold, uh, but it is noticeable that he is starting to decline a bit. Last season, still catching over 100 over 130 games. He had 550 plate appearances. He hit 257, a 315 on base percentage, and a 384 slugging. It is by far the lowest slugging percentage of his career, except for his first 11 games when he came up for a cup of coffee in 2014. That's a little bit concerning that the power is draining out of JT's bat, and we've kind of seen it. When he first came to Philly, he hit 25 home runs. In 2022 and 2023, he was still a 20 home run guy. Dropped at 14 home runs in 24, but only 99 games played. So maybe that could have been that. But 12 home runs in 134 games last season. A 700 OPS on the dot. Now, JT Realmuto is also 34 years old. He will be turning 35 in March before the start of the season. So we're talking about at age 35, 36, and 37 seasons for this contract in which JT Realmuto is getting paid significantly. And it does feel like a bit of a disappointment. It seemed like the Phillies were this close to signing Bo Bichette and pivoting to another answer at catcher. And I see a lot of comments like this all over Twitter that the Phillies are cheap. Dave Dombrowski, he's got to go. The Phillies gave Bichette what he wanted. They gave him 7 years, $200 million, or were going to give him if the offer was on the table. The Phillies were never going to be in a market for a $40 million a year player, which, with taxes, we're talking about over $80 million a year dedicated to one player on the roster. The Phillies cannot operate at that level. Are they a big market team? Yes. So there's no reason that they can't, further address, say, the outfield if the market had players on it that made sense for them. Instead, they went with a guy like Adolis Garcia for right field this season. Another bounce back candidate, which for Phillies fans and everyone all over, after last season, left a terrible taste in everyone's mouth. The Phillies had two separate guys come in on bounce back deals and neither bounced back at all. So another guy in right field that you're saying, okay, we're going to see what he can do. He was, the MVP of the 2023 World Series. Okay, sure. Better defensively than Nick Castellanos. And of course, that question still needs to be answered. That's going to get dragged out late as possible, but he's probably not going to be on this team. Almost 80% sure of that. But now, you leave fans wanting more. You see the Phillies keep winning more and more games each year. Yes, they've, outside of 2020, they have won more games every single season since 2017. They won 90, I can't even remember if it was 96 or 97 games last season. But they're a mid-90s winning team. They actually had a good 4-game series against the Dodgers, which they came up short. There are just a few things that if they go the other way, the Phillies have a real shot of knocking off the Dodgers in the NLDS. The Phillies are still a good team. Ranger Suarez, of course, has left to go to Boston. He's shipped up there on a 6-year, $130 million deal. the Phillies will be without their bulldog in the playoffs. But guess what? This year we'll see the debut of Andrew Painter. Andrew Painter is regarded as the fourth best right-handed pitching prospect in all of baseball. He's been routinely ranked in about the top 25 prospects, and the Phillies have a lot of faith in him. Last year was really a building year for Painter, as he was coming off a huge injury that really cost him his debut at the age of 20. He would have been up on the Phillies roster in 2023. But, of course, lost significant time, and now he's going to get his chance. But this is a big-time prospect. The problem with the Phillies with the starting pitching is there's no depth. If the Phillies lose a player or two, there's not much else. You're talking about an Alan Ranhel needing to be called up to help the Phillies. That's kind of it. So it's going to depend on Zach Wheeler coming back from thoracic outlet syndrome, which apparently all reports are positive. Being on make it to opening day, I think the Phillies rein him back in a little bit from that, but all reports are good on Zach Wheeler. The Phillies also bring back the runner-up unanimously in Cy Young voting, and Chris Sanchez, who his development has been one of the biggest things for the Phillies in this era. If they don't make that trade with the Tampa Bay Rays, their rotation is mid at best. Zach Wheeler being their only guy who's a huge star, and you can count on him anytime. But Chris Sanchez has evolved into this monster on the mound and one of the best left-handed pitchers in all of baseball. Then behind him, you have Jesus Luzardo, which that trade from the Marlins is looking fantastic. The more and more that we see him on the Phillies, it just seems like a slam dunk. Now, he'll have to enter spring training heading into a contract year. The Phillies would be wise to get an extension done. And I do believe a lot of the people that look at the Phillies and say they're not doing anything, they're, standing pat, they're rolling it back. Sure, but they're extending guys that have had success. Chris Sanchez is here for a long time. Jesus Luzardo could be as well. And guess what? Now the Phillies have a little bit more flexibility. They don't have to really worry about the Bo Bichette contract because he's not here. They also are going to have $38 million come off the books next season in 2027 when Nick Castellanos' contract is over, the Taijuan Walker contract is over. They're going to have money to re-sign Jesus Luzardo. Then all of a sudden you're looking down the road and like, oh, that's Zach Wheeler over $40 million a year. That's going to come off the books soon too. Meanwhile, the Phillies have a couple of young guys ready to break into the majors. Justin Crawford and Andrew Painter are almost assuredly going to be on the team on opening day. And then Miller is right behind them. You don't know where on the infield he'll end up playing, but it could be third base, could be second base. It'll have to be seen what they do in spring training with Miller. But he has been regarded now higher as a better prospect than Andrew Painter. Aiden Miller could be a very valuable major league player for the Phillies. So we're talking about three young guys. You're talking about minimal contracts. Don't have to worry about the payroll on that side of things. The Phillies are going to continue to spend money if it means they have a shot at a World Series. Now, with the Dodgers armoring up with Kyle Tucker, is it going to be a tougher task? Absolutely. But guess what? This is baseball. Anything happens in baseball. The Phillies have been on the short end of the stick of it. Just in 2023, Diamondbacks came to Philly needing to win 2 games in Philly to get to the World Series. They did that. Probably the Phillies' worst blown opportunity of this run. And then on the other side of the bracket was the Texas Rangers. The Diamondbacks and the Rangers in a World Series. That happened just 2 years ago. Well, 3 years ago now. Sorry, forgetting what year we're in. It is still January. But anything can happen in baseball. Especially in a short series, a 3-game series, a 5-game series. Usually a 7-game series, the cream does rise to the top, but sometimes the cream curdles. Sometimes it becomes cheese. Where am I going with this analogy? Who knows? But anything can happen in a baseball season. Injuries happen. Just turnarounds in careers happen. Random things happen all the time in baseball. So the Phillies are going to have a shot, just like they always do. But again, now they have JT back. Things are a little bit more settled on the roster. Last thing to do is try to find a trade partner for Nick Castellanos. You could still see to what falls if you're looking for maybe a right-handed platoon bat for left field. There's a couple options still in the market. I know some people will say Harrison Bader because he is still out there on the market, available. But he's probably going to demand a cost that isn't justified for his career stats. He'll probably get overpaid by a team that's still looking for outfield help. I'm looking at you, Mets, because I think they're going to do it. Because you can't go into the season with Tyrone Taylor and Juan Soto as your 2 outfielders. Because famously, there are 3 outfield spots. But things are just down today, you know? Everything felt like they were pointing to the Phillies signing Bo Bichette, and they weren't going to run it back. They're going to pivot. They're going to have to trade Alec Bohm. They're going to have to do this, that, and the other thing. They're going to have to do things that make them uncomfortable, but in the end, might make them a better team. But it didn't happen. The Mets swooped in, and they got him. Because the Dodgers swooped in and got Kyle Tucker. The dominoes fell in a way that wasn't favorable to the Phillies, but that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Now, the Phillies head into 2026 with pretty much the same team. A little bit improved with outfield defense and right field with Adolis Garcia over Nick Castellanos. A Gold Glover. You also have Marsh moving to left field, who has been much better defensively in left field than he's been in center. And of course, the rookie Justin Crawford, who all we hear about is his high ground ball rates, but has hit consistently at every level of the minors. So the Phillies are giving the best chance for him to develop as a center fielder by having good defense on the corners. But there's a lot of question marks. There's nothing cut and dry about this Phillies roster, other than it's, high contract stars, your Bryce Harpers, your Trey Turners of the world, your Kyle Schwarbers. We all know what they're going to do. And we're excited to see if they put up MVP numbers or all-star numbers or just their career averages. But there's a lot of new questions arising. And we're entering a new, not era of the Phillies, because that's too dramatic. A new era would be talking about, that 08 run. That was an era from 07 to 11. I mean, we are reaching to 2022 to 2026 now. Same amount of years. There's going to be a lot of questions coming up for the Phillies. And who knows if we even have baseball in 2027. Of course, a looming lockout, because apparently the commissioner and owners really want a cap in baseball. And boy, howdy, are there a lot of people calling for one after what the Dodgers and Mets did in the last 24 hours. But the players' union is strong, and they will not accept a cap, especially without concessions, such as a salary floor. Of course, that's a contentious thing from MLB teams that don't want to spend. Your Marlins, your Rays, your Oakland A's to some extent, your Pittsburgh Pirates, the small market teams that feed off of the revenue sharing of MLB. What's going to happen in 2027? Who knows? Till then, all we have is 2026. At least we have one thing to distract us in 2026 from what is an inevitable three-peat by the Dodgers. The World Baseball Classic is coming up. Of course, Bryce Harper is going to be on the team. We just heard that Brad Keller is going to be on the team as well for the Phillies. It's going to be a fun time. 2023 was an excellent matchup, culminating to a USA-Japan final, which we saw Shohei Ohtani strike out Mike Trout. It was amazing. Of course, Trey Turner in 2023 was his Captain America self, and the 2023 season was a little bit lackluster for him. It was a fun time all around. So there's that to look forward to coming in March. If you're a Phillies fan, if you're a baseball fan in general, the World Baseball Classic is a nice palate cleanser where you don't have to think about your team as much as USA. Or if, say, you come from another country, you're rooting for the Dominican Republic, you're rooting for Japan, you're rooting for Canada, whoever. But it's a fun worldwide competition that just represents the best in baseball. Yes, the Phillies did get screwed here. They sure did. If you did miss it, the report was saying that the Phillies did listen and offer what Bo Bichette wanted. He wanted 7 years, $200 million. The offer was on the table, and the Mets swooped in and offered a 3-year, $126 million deal. We're talking about $42 million a season for Bo Bichette. Of course, with opt-outs after the first and second season, he may not be a Met long. But how can you turn down over $40 million a season? I wouldn't. So yeah, the Phillies did get screwed. But we can't sit here and wallow in it. They're the Mets. Phillies, Mets, it's oil and water. It just helps in a weird, sick way. Today's events have helped to further build the rivalry between the Mets and the Phillies. So if you're a real baseball sicko, you might be like, yes, better rivalry, higher stakes. I get to boo this guy. But it just stinks that the Phillies were going to be the finalists. We're talking about writers like Ken Rosenthal, literally last night, saying that he expected Bo Bichette to go to the Phillies. Last night. That's how quickly things turned around. A follow-up here from Drakenfire. Do you think Bo agreed but backed out? No, I don't think there would have been an agreement and a pivot. I think if you agree to a contract, that's it. But it seems that the offer was on the table. Maybe they wanted to see, and I'm talking about Bo Bichette and his agent, wanted to see what happened with Kyle Tucker, because I do know that the Dodgers were kind of flirting with a high AAV short-term deal for Bichette as well. That's something that had been mentioned by a couple of writers. So instead, they go Kyle Tucker on the short-term high AAV deal. And then the Mets just kind of pivoted and took Bo Bichette from under the Phillies. But it wasn't that Bo Bichette backed out on a deal that he already agreed to. Was it the terms he wanted? Yes. Yes, they were. At least according to what's being said. So it's just a terrible situation because it just feels like the Phillies have gotten kicked in the gut here. This is unprecedented as a Phillies fan. Again, if we want to go through the history, we're talking about going from Jim Thome signing with the Phillies in 2003, and that being the first ever big free agent splash the Phillies ever made, showing that they were going to play with some of the bigger markets in baseball. Now, you come to this era of the Phillies in 2020 or 2019, signing Bryce Harper, the 13-year 330. You look at 2023, you sign Trey Turner, the top shortstop on the market, in a market that frankly had four shortstops that everybody thought were excellent. We're talking about Dansby Swanson, we're talking about Xander Bogaerts, we're talking about Carlos Correa. But Trey Turner has actually been the best of that group, and the Phillies just went in and got the guy they wanted. So it's weird. This is new. The Phillies have never really been in this spot before. Like I said, I think the closest representation to what we've had before is having Jason Worth leave to go to the Washington Nationals. But even then, it's a little apples to oranges, because of course he was a Philly and they just couldn't get a deal redone to get him extended, and the Nationals overpaid for him. Here we see the Mets overpay Bo Bichette. Again, he's getting paid $42 million a year. The Mets have a $336 million payroll. They're going to be paying so much in taxes that they're going to basically be paying $75 million in total in 2026 for Bo Bichette. But that's what happens when you have Steve Cohen as your owner. We're talking about the richest man in baseball. We're talking about a billionaire with over $10 billion. Like, we're talking about Richie Rich level rich. Honestly, Richie Rich probably wasn't even a billionaire. If he wasn't Steve Cohen level billionaire. So, it stinks. And the Mets add a player that seemingly doesn't fit their roster. They're going to have to do what the Phillies were going to do in having to trade a third baseman. But I guess they're willing to do so. Now they have to figure out what in the world they're doing with their outfield, because Tyrone Taylor is not going to solve your problems. In happier news this week, let's go to the international free agency was this week. So the Phillies, all of these names always come out months before, even years before, knowing that players are linked to different teams. But so the Phillies actually got the number 3 ranked prospect in this international signing period, an outfielder by the name of Francisco Renteria. Now, that last name should sound familiar to a lot of baseball heads out there, because it's indeed Edgar Renteria's son. Edgar Renteria, of course, being a 5-time All-Star. He was a World Series MVP, 2-time Gold Glove winner, a Silver Slugger, an excellent shortstop in the early 2000s. He, of course, would win World Series with the Giants in 2010 and win with the Marlins in 1997. But he was a shortstop, hitting .286 for his career. But apparently his son is the real deal. Francisco Renteria is being said to have plus raw power. He's only 17, but he's 6'4" and 200 pounds. MLB.com has him listed as having over 60 grade abilities in pretty much everything except a 55 arm. Of course, in the 20 to 80 grade scale, 50 is pretty much average. But so he's above average in contact, power, fielding, speed. Just his arm is slightly above average. But we're talking about a real prospect that the Phillies added this week. And honestly, one of the higher level international free agents the Phillies have ever signed. They gave this guy $4 million a year. Granted, he's 17, so you'll be hearing his name, but realistically, this isn't a guy that's going to help the Phillies for at least 4 years. At least 4, realistically 5 or 6. But the Phillies have to go through this process, just like everybody else does, of building out the rosters in any way possible. Building your farm systems, making sure you can develop young talent. And that's been a part that the Phillies have struggled to do, is really build out young talent. Now, right now, the top of their farm system is filled with some interesting talent that will contribute to the Phillies in 2026 and beyond. But these are the things the Phillies have to do, is be able to get into the international market and sign guys like this, like a Francisco Renteria. Now, the rankings for where he will be on the Phillies system still isn't available yet. They haven't released those top 30 teams for the season for 2026 yet. But it is an interesting development that the Phillies do get a guy like this to add to their ranks in the farm system. Of course, he'll start out in rookie ball or even not even stateside to begin. Who knows what the assignment will be, but from all reports, a very exciting young prospect the Phillies add. So, not all news this week has been bad for the Phillies. They also did add a reliever in Chase Shugart. Chase Shugart was with the Pirates. Career-wise, he has a 3.52 ERA. Last season, he had a 3.40 in 45 innings, and those were all relief appearances. So the Phillies add a guy for some relief depth. They didn't give up much, just a young prospect by the name of Francisco Laredo. Not anyone who was on their top 30 list or anything like that. Shugart was a guy that was DFA'd by the Pirates because they had a roster crunch. But again, the Phillies do need to add depth any way they can. Shugart does have an option remaining, a minor league option. So he'll be someone that could contribute, but that's what the Phillies were lacking last year in the bullpen, was these, lower end bullpen guys that you can churn, that aren't just cannon fodder waiting to be fired at and then fired upon for 6 runs in 2/3 of an inning. But so the Phillies add this guy, Chase Shugart, one of the few chases in Major League Baseball history. Of course, they're up there with Chase Utley. Not many others. Chase Anderson. Chase Headley. I'm running out of chases. But the 3.40 ERA, he was solid in the minors as well. Just extra depth for the Phillies. Now in the comments, we have an interesting question here by Alex Ronke. At what point do we blow it up? Do you see us possible sellers at the deadline? No. Realistically, I think the Phillies are still a good team. I think they'll perform well. They'll be in a playoff position. They're not going to sell at the deadline. Blowing it up, I don't think they do. I think the earliest you're going to see the Phillies do anything drastic like that would be at the end of the Wheeler window, at the end of his 4-year extension when he rides off to the sunset and retires. Because after that, the Phillies, they'll still have Chris Sanchez. We have no idea if they're still going to have Jesus Luzardo. That extension still needs to get done. Andrew Painter, we don't know where he'll be at in his career. It'll all be dependent upon if the Phillies can keep supplementing with talent and being active in the free agent markets while getting these young guys up and acclimated to the major leagues. So the Phillies are still within the window open for playoff appearances and a chance at the World Series. You just have to deal with the Dodgers. That's really the only problem, is you have one team that has accumulated so much talent that it feels almost impassable. Can't get by them. Just a big rock in the road. But again, this is baseball. Anything can happen. The Phillies should have taken the Dodgers to 5 games in the NLDS. Frankly, they should have taken game 1. A lot of things happen in that NLDS that could have changed the course of baseball history, and we could still have had no repeat World Series winners since the Yankees in 99 and 2000. Of course, 98 as well. They're three-peat. But as far as blowing things up, the Phillies won't be blowing it up. They'll stay within the market. They'll stay relevant. Even if there is no baseball in 2027, the penalties for the tax brackets do reset. So there's less worry that the Phillies have to keep paying out of crazy money pockets, because they are doing crazy money. I know everybody talks about that quote. The crazy money. The Phillies are going to spend crazy money. They did. They went over the tax bracket. They've had like the third or fourth highest payroll in all of baseball. The Phillies continue to do what they say they're going to do. They're going to compete for the World Series, and they're going to. They could easily win the NL East again next year. The Atlanta Braves will be a little bit better, a little bit healthier, but they haven't added much talent. The Mets, I've gone over this, the Mets have a lot of question marks. We're talking they're relying on some young starters. They don't have Edwin Diaz, don't have Pete Alonso. You're talking about Bo Bichette playing third base, a position he's never played before. Jorge Polanco playing first base, position he's never played before. And Tyrone Taylor is listed as their number one option in left field and center field. The Mets don't have 3 outfielders on the roster. So the Phillies could easily win the NL East in 2026. Now, is it going to be easy? No. It's 162 games. It's the longest season in professional sports. And nobody can predict what happens. Some years it's an easy guess, but it's just that, a guess. So the Phillies will continue into 2026, and they'll bring back a lot of familiar names, a couple new ones. I still think the Brad Keller signing is an excellent get for the Phillies. Their bullpen is definitely stronger than where it entered starting 2025. Johan Duran back again. So there's some positives to take from this offseason. There are still possibilities that the Phillies add, say, a platoon outfielder to cover the lefties against Brandon Marsh. There are a couple guys still in the market for that. So it's not to say that the Phillies are completely done, although $15 million a year is a little bit higher than what a lot of people would have liked for JT Realmuto. But this had seemed to be a sticking point for a while, is JT Realmuto wanted and thought he deserved more money. Granted, he has been one of the better catchers of his generation. It's just the fact that he is now going to be 35 years old coming into the season. But looking back on JT Realmuto's career in general, he's accumulated 38.7 WAR. I know not everybody's a big WAR fan, but he's hit 270 his career. We're talking about a 774 OPS. We're talking about great defense behind the plate, controlling run games, handling pitching staffs very well. He's been a great player. He really has. And for the Phillies, he's been an all-star twice. 2019, his first season with this team, he hit 275 with 25 home runs. Gold Gloves, Silver Slugger. 2021, he was an all-star again. 2022, he was excellent. His best year, arguably, with the Phillies. 6.5 WAR season. We're talking about 21 stolen bases as a catcher. It's crazy. Before JT Realmuto, no one ever really thought about, at least from a Phillies standpoint, a catcher that can run. Meanwhile, JT Realmuto is still out here stealing bases. 104 stolen bases for his career, even. but he will go down as one of the best catchers in Phillies history. And that's a long list from your Bob Boones, your Darren Daltons, your Carlos Ruizes. But what goes beyond JT Realmuto, who knows? Could be a guy that the Phillies haven't even drafted yet. And they have 3 years to figure out that answer. We have another question here from Alex Ronke. When do we see Painter, Miller, and Crawford, or do we use as trade chips? Now, a lot of people don't remember or just haven't seen the report about this, but Miller and Crawford were set to be traded. Now, this was back in 2024 at the deadline that the Phillies were going to trade Justin Crawford and Aiden Miller, and I think more than that, to the Chicago White Sox for Garrett Crochet. It was a deal that the Phillies thought that was going to get done. That was a fair offer, but the White Sox said no. Ultimately, in the offseason, agreeing to a deal with the Boston Red Sox, highlighted by Kyle Teal. So they have not been afraid to use them as trade chips if the right player came along. But now in 2026, we are going to see Justin Crawford get a shot to be the everyday center fielder for the Philadelphia Phillies. We will most likely see Andrew Painter on the opening day roster in the rotation. Aiden Miller, he will probably start getting some reps at third base. He's been an excellent shortstop in the minors, and it's the reason they've kept him there is because truly a shortstop is going to have more trade value than a third baseman prospect. But he's been good. By all reports, and even from me watching him play, he's a slick shortstop. And I no doubt believe he can transition to third base, but he'll get reps there. And, you know, if Alec Bohm isn't back as he is facing a free agent year, he'll play third base in 2027 for the Phillies. And these are the type of the guys, saying this again, that the Phillies can really use. These are guys that will be small contracts coming up, you know, $780,000 for a rookie player. Maybe next year they make $1 million each. That's going to help the payroll stay down. But guys playing key roles at key positions. You're talking about one of your infield spots, your center fielder, and one of your rotation guys. So that's what the Phillies have to do. If they want to be like the Dodgers, if they want to be eternally in contention, then they have to hit on some of these guys. But you got to give them a chance. I've heard, you know, some people out there even saying, well, why don't we try bringing Aiden Miller up as a platoon? You know, if he breaks through in 2026. And to that, I got to say, why? You got to let the kid play. It's one thing if his season is over in the minors, no playoffs or anything, it's September, and you want to give him a call up for a cup of coffee? Sure, do it. Why not? But don't sit here and say to bring up Aiden Miller as a platoon guy mid-season because he's forced his way into that role. No, he's got to have a lion's share of playing time to develop. Aiden Miller specifically has shown when he gets to a level, he might need an adjustment period. It happened when he went to high A. It's happened when he went to Reading. But halfway through the season, he's adjusted. He's turned on the light. He's turned it on where he's become a coveted prospect in baseball. We are talking about a top 20 prospect in all of baseball. He might even be on some top 10 lists. It's very possible. So Aiden Miller is going to have to be a guy you got to give runway to. If you want his career to take off, he's going to need the distance. But it's going to be good seeing the Phillies get some of this youth injection that is desperately needed. Again, we're talking about guys like Bryce Harper. We're talking about JT Realmuto, Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber. All these guys are over 30. Wrong side of 30. Which you can be a contributing major league player after you turn 30. But you have to be cognizant of more injury risk. You have to be cognizant of what comes after. Got to have a plan. And I'm not talking about no Dutch Vanderlyn plan. That's never going to happen. Got to think of a solid plan. There is no Tahiti. And it looks like we have another comment here. Blindsided, question mark. He went to the Mets. What does that say about the Phillies? What did Bo know that made him take the money from a team? Well, $42 million is a lot of money. So, again, the Phillies had an offer out reportedly of 7 years, $200 million. Apparently just what Bo Bichette was asking for. But as soon as Kyle Tucker signed with the Dodgers, the Mets seemed to pivot. They had a similar offer for Kyle Tucker on the table of 4 years, $220 million. And they pivoted to offering 3 years, $126 million to Bo Bichette. The thing with Bo Bichette is he is a younger free agent. He can play a year with the Mets, make $42 million. He has an opt-out out of the after the first year, and he still won't be 30 for the next free agency period, if one even happens with a looming baseball lockout. So all sources were pointing to the Phillies on a 7-year deal, a longer-term deal. And then after the events of last night, things, well, they escalated quickly. And suddenly he was a Met. So came out of nowhere with the offer. And that's pretty much the definition of being blindsided, is somebody came out of nowhere and hit you. Just happened to be it hit the Phillies where it hurt, especially Phillies fans, when they were excited about a possible change and a new star coming to Philadelphia. And then all of a sudden, he's headed to the dreaded New York Mets. The, of course, biggest rival of the Philadelphia Phillies. So, on top of a layer of not getting Bo Bichette after a lot of reputable sources saying, yeah, the Phillies are the favorites, he's a Met. The Mets were never even the picture for Bo Bichette either. There was talk of the Boston Red Sox after missing out on Alex Bregman. There was talk of the Dodgers on a short-term, high AAV deal, like they did with Tucker. But obviously they went with the Tucker route and not the Bichette route. And because the Mets needed an outfielder, which again, Tyrone Taylor, 2 of their depth spots, left field and center field. They don't have a third outfielder. They need an outfielder, but they pivoted to Bichette. And yes, I've seen this from all over Twitter, and including some of our group chat at Philly Sports Network. He's going to get a nice warm welcome on his first visit to Citizens Bank Park. Yeah, Bo Bichette is going to get booed out of the building. There aren't many players, and I can't even name a player that has spurned the Phillies and has gone away without the receiving end of a warm Philadelphia welcome. Folks, just want to advise you to keep your batteries at home. This isn't JD Drew. And that was a different time entirely. We're not doing that, but 100% voices will be heard. It'll be interesting to see. I think the first matchup in which the Mets come to Philly, I think was around June 10th, June 11th. So everyone circle your calendars for early to mid-June. Prepare for the Mets to come in, and hopefully they get swept up in the Phillies rotation, which should be fully healthy by then. By June, Zach Wheeler should be there. Chris Sanchez, Jesus Luzardo, Andrew Painter could be doing great things. Aaron Nola's still there. And remember, he set the record for most strikeouts in a row, and it was against the Mets. So, 2026 will be an interesting year for the Phillies, as it always is in this era of Phillies baseball. There'll be things to watch. there will be baseball at Citizens Bank Park, and the Phillies, by all accounts, will be good. They'll have to go up against the Mets, which now have a player which the Phillies seem like they had in their pocket, ready to go. A new toy ready to be unwrapped and played with for the new season. Instead, he'll be on the New York Mets, a dreaded rival. The Phillies will also have to deal with the Atlanta Braves, who will be definitely more healthy than they were in 2025. They probably won't have nearly as bad of a record. The Nationals still have some young talent on their side. And then there's the Miami Marlins, who still try to be a Major League Baseball team. And they're doing their darndest. But the Phillies will be good. Barring dreadful injuries from key players, which no one ever wants to even think about, and we shouldn't, they'll be good. So as we linger here in the dead of winter, we're still about just shy of a month away from pitchers and catchers reporting. Little over a month away from the first spring training game. Things are starting to even out here in the offseason. Finally, the big names all fell kind of once. Your Kyle Tuckers, your Bo Bichettes, your Alex Bregmans, all within a week here. The Phillies finally have a catcher in JT Realmuto. And who knows, there could still be some minor signings to be had. And we'll keep an eye out here at Philly Sports Network. Keep an eye out on our site. We always try to keep up to date as quickly as possible with any new information coming in. If you ever have any questions, feel to reach out at any of our accounts. My personal is listed right there at Kostival on Base. You reach us at Philly Sports Network. But yeah, the Phillies will indeed play baseball again in 2026. And we're just a couple months away. But until then, everybody sit back, relax. Hope the Mets and Dodgers don't continue to ruin baseball. Hope the lower end teams start spending some money so they're not ruining baseball on their side of things. Keep warm, stay safe, and go Phils. So everybody, have a great rest of your day. Don't think about Bo Bichette too hard, because he will get booed out of the building. But fan favorite JT Realmuto is still here. The pitching staff loves him. And hopefully everything goes well in 2026. I'm Alec Kostival. This is Metro Philly Sports Network. Go Phils.